guys, gals, athletes. It's Friday, so I'm back with more tips. I can't believe it. I think this is probably one of my longest streaks of doing this. So I even wrote a blog yesterday, so I'm pretty happy with myself. So listen, today I'm going to give more tips out, and then at the end, if you're interested, I have a couple of giveaways that I'm super excited about too, and hopefully one of them will be interesting to you, and if not, that's totally fine too. So my tips, how to achieve your goals, right? And how to achieve your goal paces. And that's something that obviously we're all interested in doing. So as a coach, what I'm always trying to help people do is figure out what their goals are and where they're at currently. And if you think about it, we try to take you from gait pace to your goal pace. So how we set that up and how I recommend everybody doing it is, so often people get really consumed with a specific race, and that makes total sense, right? I've done it, I get it, right? But what I find more powerful is if you can focus on the process and let the process be what becomes exciting, and then that's something that is always happening, and then the races become an opportunity to check in to see how your progress is going. And so that's something that I've found I've always done better at. And so one of the tips that I've always done was with my athletes is I create an avatar. And so that avatar is a perfect whatever they want to be. So they get to define what that avatar is. Obviously we go back and forth. I do it myself. And what we do is we say, okay, this avatar or this image or this perfect image of where I want to be, you know, it has to be somewhat realistic, can do all these things, right? And so you go down the list and you start checking off. It can do this, it can do this, it can do this, it can do this. Then what's really important, and where people really kind of get off track from the beginning, is you have to be honest and objective with where you are currently. And you have a pretty good understanding of where that might be, but it's also good to have people that you can trust that, you know, will be honest with you, not, you know, critical in a positive way, not kind of beat you up, but help you check in with, all right, what are the things that I feel like I'm deficient in right now? And so once you have that list, you can start to go to work on those deficiencies. And it doesn't matter when your race is, that's always taking place, right? And so that's one of the ways that I bring athletes from where they are now, which is their gait pace, to where they're going, which is their goal pace. And I think next week I'll kind of talk a little bit about the difference in heart rate and power and all that other stuff and how it relates. But high level, that's what we're trying to do. One of the things that I then do is I start to reverse engineer where we're at right now and what we need to do in order to get to where we're going. So a lot of people probably just raced an Ironman or 70.3, or people might have one coming up. And one of the things that people always come to me for is help with running and how do they run better off the bike. And the natural instinct is to always work more on the run. Again, makes total sense. But a lot of times what you want to do is you almost want to work one sport backwards, because how many times, I use this as an example when I was talking to an athlete that I coached the other day, how many times have you spectated a 70.3 or an Ironman and you see people walking after a mile or a mile and a half? You know, that's not lack of run training, obviously. It's because they're coming off those other sports too exhausted to be able to execute whatever run fitness that they do have. So one of the places that I always start when we are trying to improve the run, in addition to run workouts, is we take an inventory of where they are on the bike. Are they pacing themselves right? Do they have a good power profile? Are they able to do things that we feel that they need to do in order to execute the type of bike split that they want to do, and then also get off and run? And we talked last week about doing an effort on the bike that you could continue doing for the length of the run and duration, because if you can't do that on the bike, then how do you expect to run for that time, right? So here's a tip. Figure out what you want to do. You can use best bike split. You can, you know, however you want to figure out what kind of wattage. And I'm just going to use power today. Figure out what kind of watts that you think that you need to produce in order to do your goal, right? So let's take Ironman, because that Kona's coming up. So in the theme of Kona, I used to know what the top age groupers would ride watts per kilogram. It was talked about, it was published in some apps, you know, I could figure that out. And so I could then have an objective number to let me know exactly how hard I needed to push the power on the bike to be competitive with where I want it to be. Okay, well, I also know from experience that realistically, you can't exceed more than 80% of your threshold and still realistically think about running off the bike. And that's one of the places that triathletes go wrong. I had a graphic design friend tell me once when I tried to make my own ad, he said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So just because you can ride faster doesn't mean you should, right? So it's a good idea to try to stay at 80% or lower, right? And that's at the high end, but let's just take 80%. If we know that 80% is our max, and we know how hard we want to go, we need that to not be more than 80% of our threshold power, right? So if we can then figure out what our threshold power needs to be, which I always use 30 minutes, and I'll get into that in another, but your solo by yourself 30-minute power needs to be X, so that your run off the bike can be at 80% or less, right? A lot of times people stop there, and that's where they go wrong, right? So triathletes in general don't like to do really hard efforts, short like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute efforts. And it makes sense because you're not going to plan on using that at any point in the race, or you probably shouldn't. But there's a lot of times in the race where you can't help it, whether you're accidentally coming out of a corner or you're sprinting up a hill or whatever. The problem is if you don't ever work on your high end, like your 4 or 6 minute power, that type of high end, then there's nowhere to go beyond FTP. So your max starts to come down because you don't use it, right? You don't use it, you're going to lose it. That old adage, right? So you need to make sure that there's a significant buffer between your 30-minute power and let's call it your 6-minute power, right? Or your 4-minute power. And that's significant because that way, if you accidentally go over FTP or get up around FTP in any of your efforts, you have room to recover, and that's going to help protect your run. So a good rule of thumb is you want to be able to go for 4 minutes at 130% of your FTP. Okay, so I'm throwing a lot of numbers, right? So you know your goal is X. You know that you want that to be 80%. So then you can figure out with math, or you can ask my daughter, who's probably better at math than me as a freshman in high school, you can figure out then what your FTP needs to be so that your Ironman pace is 80% or less. And then from that FTP, that might seem unattainable to you right now, but going back to moving from goal pace to date pace, you can probably wrap your head around doing a 4-minute effort. And even if you can't do that 130% of what you want your FTP to be, you can still break that up, right? You can do 30-second intervals, you can do 1-minute intervals, you can do a sequence of whatever, and that's coaching, right? And so work on that. You bring your 4-minute power up, it's going to then be easier for you to do your 30-minute goal, and then it's going to be easier for you to hit your 80. So that's my tip for the day, and hopefully you guys don't hear the motorcycle going in the background because it's a little obnoxious. And that's what I got. So that's my tip. These are the kinds of things we talk about again in our community. I have my first office hours where I'm gonna turn on a Zoom webinar and just literally sit at the computer with it on and open for people to kind of chime in and ask their questions. You have to be part of our community to do that, but that'll be October 5th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And then I think the 1 or 2 after that, we might have Ben Canute come on to do a feedback as well too. So, all right. Next, I'm gonna do a couple giveaways. So, and this is gonna be some plugs. So just warning you, if you guys want to take off now, that's totally fine. I'm not offended. But here's what I got. I love helping athletes, and I've been accused of helping elite athletes, but I really like helping elite-minded people and elite-minded athletes, and it doesn't really matter your actual ability. I just really like helping people who like to take the next step in whatever it is, right? So I have some stuff that I know works, and I'm bringing on some new coaches, and what I'm doing is I'm working with them. I work with my new coaches for a year, and I oversee all their athletes and all that stuff. So we're looking for 10 people that I'm going to help oversee. It's going to be very inexpensive, but we want you to buy into the system. So if you're interested, if you've been kind of struggling with trying to achieve your next goal, or you're not sure how to do it, here's an opportunity. We'll work with you on your budget. That's really not that important, but you have to be willing to kind of buy into our whole system and trust the process, right? And so that I'm taking applications now. You can email me at superflycoaching.com, or you can get a hold of me at adamzuko@gmail.com. And if you're interested, if you think that might be for you, let me know. And again, I'm going to be partnering up with a couple of our coaches, so you'll have two for less than the price of one. And so that's that. Okay, so then the other thing is, you see I'm wearing all this Superfly gear. I'm moving to Florida, so I have a ton of these shirts and a ton of these hats. And so if you're interested in joining our Superfly community, the next 25 people that sign up are going to get sent a couple of these shirts and definitely a cap. And you can do that right at superflycoaching.com. So I'll see you guys hopefully next Friday, and then I'll even check in from Kona in 2 weeks, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.